Okay, what's up, horror
Hi.
fans? Pete here from the Lassercast, where we talk about horror movies and streaming shows from all the different decades. And right now we are covering, I think, what is our favorite show, Interview with the Vampire. Season 2 ended last week, but I was on a vacation in Michigan. I just got back. I just watched the finale last night, and then here I am to talk with my good friend over there, Dr. Zayas God. Danny, was it hard not saying anything about the show for the past week?
Um,
To me.
well, I put out a YouTube short, just giving my kind of spoiler-free thoughts on the final, on the finale. Athena actually caught up, used this week, her first full week of summer vacation, to catch up and watch, I think, 7 episodes of Interview with the Vampire. So I got to rewatch a lot of moments from the season as she was rewatching it. And then this morning I rewatched the finale right before our review. And yeah, I've been waiting to talk about it in detail because I think rewatching the finale this morning, I actually liked it much better than I did upon the first viewing.
Sure.
And I am super excited that they've already announced that season 3 is a thing, so I don't have to go through that torment. I don't have to feel like Louis being torn between, lovers, and I could just sit and look to the future where we will have a season 3. And I'm sure at some point later in this recording, we will talk about what we think could happen in season 3.
Yes, that's the last ticker I have planned. I have the first one right here, but I want to talk about what you just said too. It's funny that you're talking about well, what would show didn't get renewed, or do I know if it's going to come back or whatever? And the thing is, I feel like the way that this season ended, this could have been the ending of the show, and it would be satisfying if this was the ending. Like if this was just they're telling the book of Interview with the Vampire, or they're doing the movie again, but a different version. This would be a complete story and very, very satisfying. But of course, I'll always take more,
Yeah, I think that it's so important in television that you always end. It's why I always hated cliffhangers. I get it with the super popular shows that know they're going to be brought back for another season. Probably the most obnoxious cliffhanger maybe in television history was the Walking Dead finale where who was going to get killed by Negan, to the point where I know a lot of people who flat out turned. I had already given up on The Walking Dead at that point. I came back to watch the Negan season, and then I said, oh no, fuck this show, and never went back. But a lot of shows don't know they're going to get a next season. And
Right.
I always thought you can leave things open-ended, but you should always have a way to say, this is it. If it happens to be it, this is a great ending. And I guess spoiler for how this episode ended, and we're 6 days removed from the finale, so I think we can just talk about how it ends. But Louis sitting in his Dubai apartment, basically telepathically challenging every vampire in the world, if you want some, come get some, is pretty fucking great. And it's a pretty good way to just end the show if that happened to be the final thing we saw. Powerful Louis threatening the world of vampires, saying I own the night. If you don't believe me, doors are open, windows are open. Come and, take a swing. And I thought that was fucking great.
Oh, yes. Fantastic ending. Here's the thing, right? I've been watching the show with my wife since it came on. She's a huge Anne Rice fan. And just trip that she was turning a little sour on the show. She really didn't like the last episode. She didn't like episode 6. And I didn't really, I'm sorry, episode 7. And I didn't really like episode 7 that much. But then with this episode, we get to like the 40% part, like 40% in, and I'm like, oh, I don't know if I like where this is going. But then all of a sudden, there's this one scene, and this one scene just makes everything better. It like made the whole finale a fantastic ending for me. But then it actually even made the previous episode, which I had issues with, better too, where I was like, oh, okay, I actually like that episode more. I said in our last review that like every episode of the show for this season has been like a 9 or a 10 for me, and that episode 7 had been like a 7.5 or something like that for me. But then they reached this one point in this episode where it was like, oh, no, 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 that makes that last episode better. So I want to get to that point, but let's talk about how this episode starts off, right? So, as you see on the ticker down there, it says, once again, elaborating on what we see in the 94 movie. I'll state again, even though everyone's already heard me say it 50 times, I've never read the Interview with the Vampire book. So, I don't know like how faithful this part is to the book, but it's certainly different from the 94 movie, wouldn't you say?
Oh, it. I think you use the best possible term. It elaborates on it.
Yeah.
That like I've made the point that the entire theater scene in the movie is about 20 to 25 minutes from like the time they get to Paris to the time he's cutting Stephen Ray in half, and this does such a great job in the first probably 25-30 minutes of this episode, like elaborating on that and showing basically everything from Louis getting out, Armand rescuing Louis, replacing his body with another like fledgling to hide it from the fact that like Armand had gotten so pathetic that the other vampires in the troop don't even like pay attention to him.
Yeah.
The idea of Louis building this huge revenge and like like killing all of these people in the cemetery while he's like going crazy.
Yeah.
I think is such a cool moment. And then we get that really great confrontation with Santiago, where he's like just teasing him and mocking him, calling him by his actual name, Francis.
Yeah.
I love that. And we get to the Louis beheads Santiago scene, but it's done in a very different way. It's expanded upon, it's elaborated on, and I think it's done much better.
Yes. Yeah. Tell me the actor that plays Louis' name. Remind me, please.
Jacob Anderson.
Jacob Anderson. Okay. So Jacob Anderson is phenomenal, right? He is so damn good. And he's on this show where there's just these amazing talents. Armand, is amazing. Assad Zaman is amazing. Sam Reed is amazing. Ben Daniels is amazing. And he has to deal with all these larger than life performers, right? And Louis, as a character in the books and in the movie, is sort of this like lame character. But one thing that Jacob Anderson has done, and they do this intentionally, they made Louis an African American on this show, and Louis can kind of go through these different, like he can be in these different modes where he's like a very fragile man, soft spoken. He like everyone on the show kind of talks in this sort of like gothic kind of romantic way, but then he can also like on a dime turn it around and start talking like he is this like almost like gangster from New Orleans, and they kind of make reference to that later in the episode. But he he could have this edge to him that Brad Pitt's like completely missing in the adaptation in 1994, which I think maybe the character is missing in the book. But this Louis, I want to see more of this Louis, because like he can be so tough and masculine, but then he can also be very like kind of helpless and like feminine seeming too. He goes through this whole range. And at the beginning of this episode, we see that kind of tough masculine side. He's completely batshit crazy when we first see him. And he's killing people, like you said, in the cemetery and planning his revenge. And we see him sort of like mapping it out on the ground, and he's using blood. He has a scythe and stuff, and he's just crazy. But then he becomes essentially like a vampire hunter. He's like Blade basically by the middle of this episode. What I was going to say was, before we explain that one part, I wanted to ask you, there's this one part where like Armand is like feeding, it looks like a vampire, but he's like feeding them cereal or something, or like broth. I don't, like, what the fuck is that? Do you know?
I I think that was just like that was somebody that's the person he ends up like putting in the coffin to disguise that he breaks Louis out.
Okay.
So that guy's obviously like completely hypnotized, and he's just probably filling him up so that he doesn't make any noise when he's in there, and doesn't draw any further attention to himself.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so Armand, once again, we're getting these scenes where we're seeing Louis and Armand talking in the present day, and they seem like a happy couple. I mean, maybe not necessarily happy, but like they've accepted each other, and they've accepted like the horrible things that have happened in their past, and they're like wanting to be with each other. And that's going on with Daniel in the present day. And then we see this scene of like Louis hunting down the other vampires, and the way that he hunts them down, like, okay, so you have this one sequence. I was talking about Louis being like a gangster. That they kind of change the camera angles, they change the lighting. Everything becomes almost like this like 70s blaxploitation, like scene where he's getting revenge. There's like this montage of him like burning down the theater of the vampire, and then like he kills one vampire with like his tool. And then I fucking loved when he takes out those two on the bike, right?
Yeah, he like cut their brake lines or their gas lines, and then he like used his power that he got from Armand of like being able to conjure fire to like make the. And I love at the exact same time you see Santiago's reaction to that in the sewer, and like Santiago's realizing, and it's just like these two vampires coming at each other, like one is mocking the other and basically luring him in, and they basically do the, I thought that was great. Ben Daniels, he goes out quickly, but he goes out in that like one glorious final like path of rage through the sewer, which I thought was great. I love the tease. Like he's calling him Francis. He's telling him his own backstory. He's mocking the size of his penis. It's literally like almost schoolyard nonsense.
Yeah.
That's like how much they like are antagonistic to each other, to the point where he's like, I think Santiago has a line where he goes, well, my penis only looks small because my balls are so big. And I was fucking dying.
Yes.
It's just like great vampire schoolyard bullying that leads to like this final confrontation between them.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, Ben Daniels, when he dies, I was like, oh, that's it. But it's so like he goes out in a blaze of glory. It's all basically anticipation. The last episode, episode 7, was this like long drawn out retelling of the whole show, essentially, just to get to Claudia and Madeline dying, right? But then you have this like long drawn up, like it's driving towards Santiago and Louis fighting each other, and then Louis just decapitates him when he flies out of the sewer. But
I think that also, I think the reason why they didn't want to do a prolonged scene there is because at the end of the day, Santiago is kind of a tertiary character. I mean, you have Louis, Lestat, Armand. You had Claudia. You have Daniel. So Santiago is this kind of tertiary character. He's like a secondary villain, but also I think that it plays into the idea that he just was never as powerful as Louis and Armand and Lestat. They are like a vampire class above every other vampire we've met. Now they do name drop some vampires in this episode that are probably more powerful, which I was like, upon first viewing, I was like, yeah, I felt like I was Leonardo DiCaprio, and I was like,
right. Yes. Yeah, so we'll get to that and how it teams up or leans into Queen of the Damned, right? Because that's the main one that you're pointing at. I before we move off of Ben Daniels, though, I need to bring up the fact that he's like, do you want to know what we did with her ashes? That such a fucked up thing. He's saying that basically they put Claudia's ashes in the popcorn. They used her ashes for their eyeliner. He would take her ashes and put them in his hand and spit into his hand and then masturbate in his coffin. Like, so depraved, so fucked up. But like, these two men are just basically just building each other up until their rage is going to burst from their bodies. And then we just kill him right away. Now, let's get to that scene where they do name drop a certain vampire goddess, right? So Louis and Armand are in an apartment. I think they're in like Louis' apartment or Armand's apartment or something. And it's daylight. There's a beam of light coming in from outside that's cutting between the two of them. And Armand basically says, "I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it up for you." And he says like, "Will you ever forgive me?" And then Louis says he'll never forgive him. And then they go to confront Lestat. And I wanted to know, on first viewing, what did you think was going to happen in that scene?
I kind of just thought they were. I didn't think they were going to kill Lestat. I that never crossed my mind.
Yeah.
I thought that Louis would like kind of break down and kind of guiltily stumble out. But I thought this scene, and again, having just literally rewatched this in like the minutes before we came on to record.
Yeah.
This scene pairs so perfectly with the final scene. Not the final scene, but the last meeting between him and Lestat towards the end of this episode.
Yeah.
They basically go in, they threaten to burn Lestat alive. And I love Lestat brings up the fact that he has the blood of these ultra powerful vampires inside of him. Magnus, his maker, and Akasha, aka Aaliyah from Queen of the Damned.
Yes.
And who we've never heard her name on this show before. So that's like a big drop for like fans of the Anne Rice universe.
Yeah.
The ARU, as we call it. And my favorite part of this is just Lestat going, also, I have to be like, will it, like, he can't get set on fire unless he wants to be set on fire. And then he just kind of just casually goes, and I'm not in the mood right now. and so I love how, and this is another, like, these three characters. Louis is like, fine, I'll kill you in another way. I'm going to make out with Armand, and I'm going to go and be with Armand for the rest of eternity while you're alone. And in my head, I'm going, here's how I'm going to fuck with your life. I'm going to go be miserable with the beige pillow.
Yeah, right.
And it's like, and again, I thought of like actual breakups that I've had where, like, I know how I'm gonna drive her crazy. I'm gonna go out with this other girl. And meanwhile, like the second there's a breakup, like the other person is like off doing their own thing, and they're not thinking about you. And like you think about like rebounds, right? Like that's they're there more for you than they are for the other person, and it just like you just said, there's the scene that ends with uh Louis telling Armand, "I'll never forgive you," and then one scene later, he's like, "I'm gonna stay with him forever, just to spite you, Lestat." And I'm like, I don't think that's doing what you think it's doing. I that that's cutting
Yeah,
off your nose to spite your face right there, Louis.
well, a few things, right? We actually find out that that was Lestat's plan after all, was for that to happen. We find that out later. But besides that, man, because this show really is about relationships and romance. Like when Louis is crazy and he's killing people, he's like sucking the gasoline out of a bike, and then a cop comes over, and the cop's like, "What are you doing behind that bike?" And then the next scene is the cop just dead on a pile of corpses. And I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's right. This is a horror show. It's about vampires." You forget, but then like really the driving force of this show is this between these two characters, and everything is just like a metaphor for what we go through with our relationships. And he's like, yeah, I could literally kill you. Here's the fire in my hand right now. I could literally kill you right now. I mean, even though Lestat's like, no, you couldn't. But it's like there's this epic shit that everyone is into, the vampire stuff, but then there's just the basis of the show, which is these two men that love each other. This other man comes into the picture, and he just like takes over the guy's life, basically. And that's really what we kind of come onto the show for. Well, that sounds a little risky over there, but what I was gonna say was trending right now on Twitter is Lumond, and I think because people probably miss that relationship, or they wish that relationship kept going. But as he ends things with our Lestat and basically says he's killing Lestat, we then transition back to the present, and good old real Rashid leaves a note for Daniel. So this is the scene, Danny. Theme where I was like, oh yeah, this is really good. This is really good. This is turning it around for me. This made the last episode so much better. What did you think of this scene where it's revealed what really happened in the night of that play?
I mean, I thought it was great. I love the just the Eric Bogosian's line readings are
Yep.
really good. And I love the idea that like for Armand and Louis, they're like, we're done. That's it. The interview's over. Let's go have dinner. And Daniel's just like, dinner sounds great. Like, I'm invited, right? Oh, great. Thank you. But can I just ask like one or two more questions? And he starts with these kind of like non-specific things. Like, how many of those soldiers did you hypnotize?
Did Lestat?
Okay. Yeah. And Louis like, what a weird question. Okay. And I love the idea that like Daniel's response of just like, huh. And so that Louis has to be like, okay, what's that? What's the huh? What's your next question?
Right.
And like Armand is like, guys, can we go eat? Like, can we go eat before it's revealed that I directed the play that killed Claudia and that I was willing to kill Louis? Can we go eat before that happens?
Yes. Now let me ask you this: did you think that they were actually going to kill Daniel if that hadn't happened? Because they're like, we're going to go eat, and then they're like, this is very special for you, Daniel. Did you think that like they're like, okay, the interview's done. Now we're going to kill Daniel, and basically it's going to like kind of tie everything up? Because the only reason why Daniel was alive was because of that horrible day in San Francisco. and like they were like, okay, we're gonna keep him alive. Now he's fulfilled the interview. We're gonna kill him. Did you think that was gonna happen or no?
Honestly, I didn't even think about that. I I think Louis was on the side of keeping Daniel alive since 1973. Um, I don't know if Armand obviously was always going to have, had always had a thing for wanting to, hurt Daniel and or, do other things, as we'll see later on. But I didn't put that together. That's certainly something to think about.
Yeah.
But the way that Daniel and Louis leave things makes me think that that wasn't on Louis's agenda.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, and in that sequence, I love how you like kind of framed it, explain how like Armand is acting. Assad Saman, like we've said this already, he's such like a good looking guy, and with those contacts, he just looks like this other kind of worldly creature. And just him kind of sitting there reacting to what Daniel's asking about, and his eyes are getting bigger. He's looking more nervous. Such a fun thing to just watch. And um, I love when he's asking the questions, and he brings up a really good point, a point that someone brought up 2 episodes ago, or in episode 7, where they're like, "How's this one guy Sam standing here with the scythe and keeping Armand at bay?" And we brought that up ourselves. We were like, well, maybe it's not just this guy. Maybe it's the whole vampire theater or whatever. All this stuff. And we kind of would explain things away, but it's more simple than that. It is that Armand actually participated in this whole thing. And the reveal is so fucking good too, because it's like he wrote the notes. You see Daniel looking down at the notes on the paper. Then he gives the paper to Louis. And I was like, oh shit, they're just going to like rip Daniel's head off right now. Like Armand's going to set Daniel on fire. And then Louis like looking through it, and the acting is so good. He's kind of like a almost like a Nosferatu vampire looking at the paper. Like he's like this with his nails on the paper, and he's reading real intently, and the tension's just building up and building up. And it's so good. And then we come to the idea that Lestat is the hero. That Armand, claiming that he saved Louis's life using his power, did not. In fact, he was waiting for Louis to be sentenced to death. And then Lestat is the one that was like banishment. So that fucking moment, that was it right there,
Yeah. I love he didn't watch the play. He directed the play. Like
right.
And you see these scenes of Armand giving direction to Santiago while Lestat is just sitting there, and you realize how, this is something that's been building all season, that we, going back to San Francisco, and even maybe before that, how Armand he's the ultimate unreliable narrator, because he's just changing everything in the story to make himself look like the better than he is. And then like you hear them in the kitchen, he's like frantically trying to explain his part away. And he did that in San Francisco too, where he's frantically trying to like do everything in his power. And you brought up Assad Zaman earlier. I don't think there's ever been an actor who I've enjoyed more at being pathetic.
Yes.
He is so good, the actor, at playing this sniveling, pathetic character, and the juxtaposition of him being one of the more powerful vampires that we've seen, but being so just ridiculously pathetic in every aspect of his relationship with Louis. I mean, and I don't think it's I don't think it's a coincidence that even sexually, Louis is dominant over him. We made the joke, like take off your clothes and lay face down in the coffin, right?
Yes, yes, yes,
like so like Louis is the physically dominant one in their sex life.
yes,
He's made it. Louis is so driven away from him at one point that he is willing to confess all of his vampire sins to this, poor, probably bisexual writer in San Francisco. And when Armand interferes with that, he's like, you know what? Fuck this. I'm going to just go walk into the sun to get away from this beige pillow. And, and when Armand actually has a moment of, yeah, you know what? I choose my coven. I'm actually going to make a decision. I'm going to choose my coven over, he has a line where he says, I've been with my coven for 200 years. How can I guarantee that we would have that much time together? Or like, and that's why he chose the coven and was willing to obviously have Madeline and Claudia killed and actually have Louis killed. And it's like the first moment where he like mans up and like makes a choice, but then he instantly goes back on it when
right,
Lestat saves Louis,
yeah,
and he takes the credit for that, and runs away with him.
yeah,
It's just he's such a friggin' loser character. Like I can't wait to see if he comes back next season, what he's even going to be like,
yes,
of where he's scorned to the point where, again, spoiler alert, the episode's been out a week already, where he turns Daniel into a vampire.
yeah.
And obviously he's not with Louis anymore. So what even is he if he's in next season? Like I really want to see that.
Yes, yes. I do want to see that too. I want to see more Hassan Zaman, and it's funny because I never really wanted to see more Antonio Banderas from the 1994 adaptation. And he's Antonio Banderas. You are 1,000% on the money there. That he's like so good, or you enjoy watching this kind of pathetic character. He's pathetic yet powerful at the same time. And I wanted to comment about like the choosing the coven over Louis stuff, because he does say this thing of like, I didn't know how long our love was going to last. I've been with this coven for 200 years. The showrunner, who is just fucking amazing. He's made this amazing show. Obviously, he's worked in theater before. He almost won a Pulitzer for one of his plays. Like, I wonder if he draws anything from that experience to make this whole theater to vampire part of the show. And like, there is that feeling, because you mentioned relationships before, you mentioned rebounds. Like, there's that feeling of like having to choose between your friends and your girlfriend, your boyfriend, whatever. Like, you have to choose between the two. Sometimes you get put in these scenarios where you're like, okay, well, my friends don't really like my girlfriend, but I really love my girlfriend, so I'm going to choose my girlfriend over my friends, or vice versa. And that's essentially what Armand does, right? And I'm sure that if you are in a theater group, that's probably a very strong bond. That's like, I'm not going to say it's like being in the military, but it's like that kind of thing where you're going through something with a group of people and they are very, very close to you. And so for Armand to betray Louis like that, since we love Louis so much, it seems so like, how could he do that? But when you look at it in the big picture terms, Louis could have just been a passing fling for him that he really liked. But in that moment, he chose his theater. And
Yeah, and
so,
and just to piggyback on that, like they keep bringing up that they've been together for 76 years. But
yeah,
like when you're eternal, what is
right,
76 years,
right.
right?
Yeah,
It's like what does it mean? Armando's been alive for what, 500 years?
yeah,
So 76 years is not even a fifth of his life. It's like a sixth or seventh of his lifespan as a vampire.
right.
So, and obviously they had not been together for 76 years back in Paris.
No, no. Yeah, and it's nothing in the whole lifespan of these vampires. Very good point. And so, like, I don't know what's going to happen with Armand moving forward. I don't know what's going to happen with Louis moving forward. because essentially with this reveal kind of solidifies what happens in the books, right? Because Sherry and Pepper were telling me this too, that Lestat really does seem like that villain in the first Interview with the Vampire book. He seems like the 1994 Tom Cruise Lestat, where he's like a villain, but you just kind of love him because he's so charming. Then in the other books, he still does mean, cruel things, and he's a selfish bastard in all the other books, but he's absolutely the hero of this series. And so, we'll get to the fantasy booking of what's going to happen with Lestat. But what I was surprised about was that the rest of this episode plays out like the rest of the movie. It just kind of does it in its own way. Lestat in the book, this is what Sherry and Pepper were telling me, was that he's still this kind of decrepit Lestat that we see in the 1994 movie when he's in France. And then he's still this, decrepit Lestat when Louis sees him again in the present day of the book. But then in this one, Louis returns to New Orleans and he encounters Lestat. And Lestat's pretty pathetic, but he's not physically pathetic. I think that, like, mentally, he's dealing with the fact that, like, Louis has left him. He can't be with Louis. And he's also, of course, dealing mentally with the fact that he burned his own kid. Now, that's something that I kind of wanted to talk to you about, too. The idea of killing Claudia, Lestat killing Claudia, Armand killing Claudia. Like, do you think that how they handle that is right? Because it's almost like, they murder someone. They murder a child. And so, like, Louis lives with Armand, who participated in the murder of his daughter or his, like, his sister, whatever you want to call her, for 70-something years. And then he forgives Lestat, at the end of this episode, too. Do you think that that makes sense to you?
I think that it's less about it being. I don't know. I think that the whole point of this show is that these two vampires, and then you add in Armand also, their love kind of conquers everything else or surpasses everything else, including the and again, it's that idea that you're eternal. So like time heals all wounds works differently when time could be infinite.
Yeah.
And given 76 years to think about anything, would you be forgiving of somebody who you once loved, who wronged you in the worst possible way? I mean, it's funny because we keep bringing up the movie and obviously the book, and we spent a lot of our reviews for episodes 1 through 6 talking about, when Claudia dies, and it feels like that is something that had to happen because it was written to happen.
That's a good point.
And it basically creates. I think that scene is so important because it makes Louis, it hardens Louis to the Louis that we see at the end, where like Louis at the end is alone. He's not with Lestat. He forgives Lestat, but he's not with him at the end of this season. And the fact that he's gone from being kind of pathetic in his own right to being like where he throws Armand out, almost kills Armand, threatens him, shakes Daniel's hand, sends him off, goes to Lestat, makes peace with Lestat, and then goes home to Dubai and is basically like, all right, vampire world, I'm here. I own the night. Come fuck with me.
Yeah.
I think that doesn't happen if Claudia doesn't die the way that she does. And So I think that the forgiving of Lestat, I think I'd have a lot bigger of a problem with it if he was like, I forgive you, Lestat, and then they just like made out and got back together, and the season ended with them like enjoying tea. But it, you know what I mean?
Or like drinking the blood of some British people. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, I really, really good points. Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, even in the previous episode, and this is why this episode sort of makes the last episode better, is because you see this different perspective where like Louis is like begging and begging Lestat to turn Claudia into a vampire. And so, I mean, this is going to sound really fucked up, but Claudia, in a way, is almost like how do I explain it? She's almost like a thing that Lestat and Louis use, which I know that sounds fucking horrible because we're talking about a person. I mean, we're talking about a vampire that's fictional, but like it's very realistic. I'd hate to say this. This is really dark as fuck, but people use their children against their spouses. People like use the guilt of what happens to their kids against their spouses. People use their children as leverage if they're going to divorce someone. You know, they use their children in certain ways. And I think that Claudia, you know, like a child that's born to two parents, they have no choice in being born. Claudia didn't have a choice to be a vampire. You know, she was just turned into a vampire by these two male vampires that become her parents essentially. And that sequence when Louis finally meets up with Lestat, I mean, first of all, it's super interesting because it's very, very similar to when Brad Pitt is reunited with Tom Cruise, right? Like it kind of looks the same. The lighting kind of seems similar. I think maybe even the dialogue, there's some similar dialogue. But there's an extra, there's like this fledgling that Lestat has made. And then Lestat's like playing a piano, but it's just like keys drawn on some wood. And then it's so funny just to hear Lestat be like, Siri, stop playing music. You know, like it seems so weird to have Lestat in this modern world.
I love
Right.
that scene so much. I wrote down in my notes like Lestat uses Siri.
Right, 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 right. It's so funny. And then like so he's sitting there and you know they have this amazing see like the scene is incredible because it's just these two actors just talking to each other and crying right now just to kind of show their acting ability. I think that like as a man you kind of are always taught like you're not supposed to cry or like you're not supposed to show emotion like so to like just almost like weep directly in front of another guy is so like it goes against like what we're sort of like programmed to be like. And this episode ends with these two men just like talking to each other, crying to each other, and then embracing in the middle of a hurricane too in New Orleans. But
Yeah.
like the acting is so fucking good. It's like it could just be a fucking play where it's
I
these go ahead.
I was rewatching it this morning, and Athena kind of like stirred while I was rewatching it, and woke up like fully during that scene, and just hears Sam Reed talk for like 2 seconds, and just goes like sleepily, "Oh my god, he's so good," and I was like, "What the fuck?"
We have our first comments. By the way, I see a bunch of y'all watching, but we don't have as many comments as last time. But Awakened Soul Vibes says Claudia was a throw blanket to Louis. I agree with Armand on that. I
Yeah.
think that's kind of what we're talking about, soul blanket or soul vibes. There you go. I'm sorry, I get my things mixed up here. But yeah, I mean, he's fucking phenomenal. That scene is incredible. And then you know, he shows remorse. He said that he's basically been thinking about Claudia constantly for the past 76 years, and that's what sort of made him be like this. And we know in the books that Lestat does see Claudia. This is kind of a spoiler for the books. I apologize, but like he does kind of interact with Claudia as like a ghost, or like at least in his mind, he sees like Claudia. So he has remorse over what he did. But as we sort of transition now to the end of this show and then the possibility of this future, we should talk about this fucking amazing scene with Daniel where he's being interviewed by David Costable. So that's the actor's name. And Danny, you said that you've never watched Breaking Bad, right?
No.
Okay. So he's a character on Breaking Bad for like maybe 2 seasons. Then he's on Billions. And when I just saw him on this show being the news anchor, I was like, oh my God, I fucking love him so much. That fucking scene was so great where like Daniel's just like telling him off while he's interviewing him. Did you get a couple of fucking chuckles out of that?
I did. It almost made me like angry in the sense that like the they bring on an author and like instead of like talking about the author's book, they immediately start like trying to mock the author for writing it. Like he's like, so we have this author on, Daniel Malloy. So what the fuck happened to you? Why are you writing vampire books now? Like, aren't you better than this? And
Right.
Like, Daniel's like, hey, go fuck yourself. And like,
Right.
here's my book. It sold millions of copies, and you're a piece of shit. And it's like it almost felt like Louis and Santiago trading like insults in the sewer. Like,
Yeah.
except it was on live British TV.
Yeah. He has so many fucking good lines. I can't even like paraphrase all of them, but like he just says like fuck you at the end. He he tells the guy how he's like a hack. It's so good, it's so funny. And Daniel is so arrogant, and then it's because Daniel himself is a vampire. Now, I don't remember in the books who turns Daniel into a vampire. I don't know if it's Louis. I don't think it's Lestat. Because the way that the movie ends in 1994 with him attacking Daniel, that's not how it goes in the books. But Daniel absolutely is a vampire, but he's young. He's like at least the Christian Slater age when he's a vampire in the books. So we have this older man vampire. How did you feel about that with this Daniel?
I wasn't sure if I liked it. The first upon first viewing, I obviously remember the ending of the movie with Tom Cruise kind of flying down onto the convertible as like a scared Daniel is fleeing. But it keeps Eric Bogosian. It is Armand. Okay, thank you for the comment.
Thank
Armand.
you, Shannon.
So, I mean, it's interesting that he says to Armand, like, don't harm him. And then he turns him into a vampire, which was that Armand attacking him? Was that Daniel asking to be turned? Daniel doesn't seem like he's, like, very happy that he's a vampire. Like, he seems like he's dealing with it, but he doesn't seem like he like says something where he like mocks Armand. Like he's like, well, you have to talk to my maker about that.
Right. I feel like Armand is super passive aggressive. He's never totally aggressive. Like I said before, there's that scene where Louis confronts him, Daniel sitting right between them, and I thought it was going to be like a quick cut where like Armand is like decapitated Daniel or like he set him on fire, but there's nothing like that. And even there's a part where Louis walks out of the room and he doesn't say to Armand, don't hurt Daniel yet. He just walks out of the room and Armand is in there with Daniel. I'm like, okay, well, now he's just going to rip his fucking throat out, right? But he doesn't do anything like that ever. He's not like that aggressive one. He's aggressive to one of the members of his coven, like before Lestat meets him years and years ago. But otherwise, he's like just so passive. I mean, he confronts people throughout this whole season, but he never like kills another vampire or does anything aggressive, right? So, I mean, yeah, I guess he fucking does torture Daniel in San Francisco. Whoops, I almost kind of forgot that detail. But I think that it's like a kind of a catty, kind of passive aggressive thing to turn Daniel into a vampire. Like, sure, Daniel probably wants to be a vampire, and he's like, well, I didn't hurt him. I just made him a vampire. That's my interpretation of that.
Yeah.
Turning.
It's also got to be like you said, like it's got to be weird for Daniel, being that he's what, 60? He's like in his late 50s, early 60s.
Yeah.
He has like adult children.
Right.
And Yeah, so it's not like, he has the eternal youth of Armand, Louis, and Lestat, who all look like fucking chiseled out of like marble.
Yeah. These GQ guys. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Awakened Soul Vibes. I want to give credit to G Munden 1, 2. They also told us that Armand turns Daniel into the books. Thank you. We always appreciate y'all giving us the info we need. And then Awakened Soul Vibes says again, what if Armand bites Daniel to save Daniel from the other vampires? That's probably a good point too. I feel like Daniel wanted to be a vampire from the beginning. Okay.
I feel
Yeah,
like
he
Daniel
did.
was itching in 1973.
Right.
That he
73,
was
73.
like he would have been okay with Louis turning him in 1973. I don't like, again, like, I don't know, 30, 40 years have passed since then. He's not
Mm-hmm.
a 20-plus-year-old budding reporter anymore.
Wait,
So
73 to present day, that's 50 years.
yeah, so he's probably in his late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah, he's an old dude. Yeah. So, I mean, I know that Daniel is in the books moving forward, like Queen of the Damned and stuff. He might even be in the Vampire Lestat. But now we have this, like when you first start the interview of the vampire story, it just feels like there's maybe two vampires in the world, maybe more. Even in the beginning of this season, there's the idea of like, we can't find any other vampires. Where are they? And now once you get to this point in the story, it's like, oh no, there's a ton of vampires out there. And so that brings us up to kind of this Vampire Lestat, Queen of the Damned territory, right? Now,
Lestat even says, with that like punk rock fledgling that he has, that he says, I'm about to go on a world tour, which I instantly thought of like, oh, somebody called Jonathan Davis because we're going to need some rock songs. We're going to need some new metal songs.
yes.
ASAP. Yeah.
But see, I love that though, because like when the Queen of the Damned movie comes out, you could have a metal band be the big thing in the world because it made sense, right? I actually really love this scene because when he mentions Siri, it's like, oh yeah, no, we're in the modern day. Like, who the fuck is big in music in the modern day? Like, I think maybe like Taylor Swift is big, right? But like, what would a Lestat superstar be in the modern day? Because I don't think he would be the lead singer of a metal band.
No. Maybe like maybe like it really tells you how little I listen to modern music that I'm like, the first thought in my head of like a male led super popular band, and I'm like Maroon 5. I don't know.
Oh god, or like Coldplay, right?
Those were my first two thoughts, were Maroon, which shows you how little I listen to modern music right now.
Yeah, we got a
Daniel
little.
was too busy being in Lumond's business. Wow, you are not kidding. Lumond is
Lumond is trending. Yes.
wow.
So let's because we always try to do like an hour. Let's tie this all together of like, what does Interview with the Vampire Part 3 look like? What does that look like?
I think we are going to see. I think that it becomes I think you have various avenues you can go down. I think you can do, because none of the vampires are together. So you have Lestat is seemingly on his own in New Orleans. I am her and she is me, as he describes the city.
Yes.
And as somebody who's been to New Orleans a lot, I could totally feel that vibe. It's an amazing place.
Yes.
You have obviously Louis facing down the threat of, it seems, all the vampires in the world from his tower in Dubai.
Yeah.
Armand is somewhere, probably crying in his coffin. And right. Daniel is on world tour giving, talks about his best-selling book. Yeah. So, like, there's definitely yes. Oh, that would be, yeah, like a Meatloaf style vibe.
Yeah, I love that actually. Yeah. Just for those of you listening as a podcast, Awakened Soul Vibes said Meatloaf vibes. It would be glam rock, and I think of like a band like Foxy Shazam, which they're not even big anymore, but like they kind of had this like kind of Queen kind of vibe, this like rock arena kind of rock vibe, and I could kind of see like Lestat being like that, or like the band The Darkness. But like I feel like that's just not big enough nowadays. But I mean, maybe you just have to make it like it would be big because he's a fucking vampire, right?
Yeah,
Um, to what I think is this is kind of my speculation. We can kind of riff on this. Is that they really ended this show where it's like this is about Louis and Lestat. This show is about Louis and Lestat, and Louis really like his character diminishes as Lestat's character grows in the books that follow Interview with the Vampire. And so what I think might happen is Lestat might like leave New Orleans and go on tour, like kind of like he's essentially putting a target on himself to protect Louis. That's what I think is going to happen in this third season, where it's like, okay, everyone's after Louis, and like now I'm going to make myself the big thing. I'm going to show people that vampires exist. He
that
he
was
just wrote a
the
book about it. Go ahead,
that
go ahead.
was the whole point of like Queen of the Damned, the movie, was that
Right,
Lestat had like put vampires out into the world,
right.
and uh, all the vampires were coming for him because of that. And I love that idea, and I love that maybe Louis almost comes to his rescue, and we get like a Louis and Lestat versus the world kind of
Right,
ending,
right, right,
like in the final episode.
right.
And who knows? Maybe we and I'm sure that maybe Armand is leading the group of vampires against them. Maybe Daniel is like there in the background giving more interviews where he's cursing out people on the air because he doesn't give a shit anymore.
Yeah,
Muse. That Shannon gave another good one. Muse is another one. Like
yeah.
all of my friends who are my age, who listen to modern music, love Muse, and I like the songs I've heard by them. But like I have friends that that are like connected to people that
Yep.
like go to see Muse all the time whenever they tour in like the tri-state area. And I could totally see that being the style of music that they go with
Yeah, fuck yeah.
potentially.
Yeah, and I love Muse myself actually. I was gonna say that uh fuck. Yes, there's one key thing I think is gonna happen though. I think that everything you just said about Lestat and Louis is gonna happen, but that I think that maybe Daniel might get brought in to interview Lestat now. And then we'll have present day stuff with Louis and Lestat together, but then we're gonna have like vampire Lestat stuff where it shows him seeing Akasha and stuff in the
Maybe
past.
I love that because then you can do Interview with a Vampire Part 3, and Daniel is interviewing Lestat,
Right,
and he goes, "My new book, The
right,
Vampire Lestat."
right. Exactly. That's kind of what I think is happening too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, dude, I fucking loved talking about this show with you. We love you guys leaving comments and stuff. You guys would comment a lot. You guys would watch the hell out of these videos. So we appreciate you because we're a very, very fucking small channel, but any kind of attention that we get from you guys, we are very grateful for. So thank you so much. If you guys want to give us some suggestions on what to cover next, because me and Danny actually love covering shows, but there are not a lot of consistently good horror shows out there. We've covered Yellow Jackets. Danny has done a phenomenal job covering Chucky on USA. But yeah, I think right now we're at a loss for what to cover next as far as shows go. You know, um,
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
figure it out. Yeah. So you want to tell them what's going on our channel though? Besides that,
Um, well, I have a bunch of short reviews up that I was doing the week that Pete was on vacation. I reviewed a new indie movie called Cold Blows the Wind, which is available on VOD, which is pretty good. A lot of references to Evil Dead,
oh
um,
nice,
and like shape shifting kind of things. I thought it was pretty cool. I also just reviewed a short review of Maxine.
oh
Um,
nice.
And if you get to see that, Pete, maybe we could do like a deep dive into that since we did our whole Thai retrospective earlier this year.
Fuck yeah.
And aside from that, it's just really been Interview with a Vampire. So we say goodbye for season 2.
Yes, we say goodbye. But besides that, we're also having our M. Night Shyamalan of summer, right?
Oh, that's right. Yes.
And so, we have to cover Switch. The fuck? Split. There you go. It's one of those. Yeah. That's coming up soon, probably this week. And then, we're going to watch Trap when it comes out too. So, guys, thank you so much for sharing the coffins with us. And we'll all cry and hold you together in our arms. We love y'all, and we'll see you guys